In the vast expanse of rural Colorado, where success is often measured by the prosperity of one's land and livestock, there are properties that become symbols of failure in the eyes of their communities. For some ranchers, economic hardship and personal tragedy can transform once thriving operations into sources of shame that neighbors whisper about and creditors circle like vultures waiting for the final collapse. This is the story of Samuel "Sam" Rivers, a 51-year-old rancher whose property had become the subject of cruel jokes and pitying stares throughout Mesa County, and the extraordinary discovery that would transform his broken-down ranch from a symbol of failure into something that would capture the imagination of people around the world. When mounting debts and years of bad luck had reduced Sam's operation to little more than crumbling buildings and barren fields, no one could have predicted that his determination to restore his family's legacy would lead to a find that would rewrite local history and change his life forever. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden beneath the most unlikely circumstances, and sometimes what appears to be worthless ground holds secrets that can transform everything we think we know about a place and its past. Before we dive into this incredible story of perseverance, discovery, and redemption, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. We love connecting with our viewers around the world. The ranch that time forgot, Samuel Rivers stood at the kitchen window of his dilapidated farmhouse, looking out at what remained of the cattle operation that had been in his family for 4 generations. At 51, Sam possessed the weathered hands and sun-beaten face of someone who had spent his entire adult life working the land, but he also carried the weight of someone who had watched everything he loved slowly crumble despite his best efforts to hold it together. The Rivers Ranch had once been one of the most successful operations in Mesa County, Colorado. With 1,500 acres of prime grazing land, modern facilities, and a herd of prize-winning Angus cattle that had been the envy of ranchers throughout the region. But a series of devastating setbacks over the past decade had transformed the property into something that local residents now referred to as the Ghost Ranch, or Rivers Folly, when they thought Sam couldn't hear their whispered comments. The decline had begun 8 years earlier, when a prolonged drought had forced Sam to sell most of his cattle herd at a significant loss. Before he could recover financially, his wife Margaret had been diagnosed with cancer, and the medical bills had consumed what remained of their savings and forced them to mortgage the ranch to pay for treatments that ultimately proved unsuccessful. Margaret's death 3 years ago had left Sam not only grief-stricken, but also facing bankruptcy, with creditors demanding payment of loans that now exceeded the current value of his property. On this particular October morning, Sam was reviewing foreclosure notices from the bank when he heard the familiar sound of vehicles approaching his house. Through the window, he could see 2 pickup trucks pulling into his driveway, and he recognized the occupants as representatives from Mesa County Bank, who had been pressuring him to accept their offer to purchase the ranch for significantly less than what he owed on his various loans. "Mr. Rivers," called out Janet Morrison, the bank's senior loan officer, as she climbed out of her truck with the confident stride of someone who held all the cards in whatever negotiation was about to take place. "We need to discuss your situation." Sam walked out onto his front porch, noting that Janet was accompanied by 2 other bank officials and a man he didn't recognize who was carrying surveying equipment and a briefcase that suggested he was probably a property appraiser. "Ms. Morrison," Sam replied, his voice carrying the resignation of someone who had run out of options, "I assume you're here to discuss the foreclosure proceedings." "Actually, we're here to make you one final offer," Janet said, pulling out a folder containing documents that Sam assumed represented the bank's latest attempt to acquire his property. "We're prepared to purchase the ranch for $200,000, which would cover most of your outstanding debt and allow you to walk away from this situation without filing for bankruptcy." Sam felt his stomach clench as he processed the offer. $200,000 was less than half of what the ranch had been worth before the drought and his wife's illness had destroyed his financial stability, and it was also significantly less than the amount he currently owed to various creditors. "And if I refuse your generous offer?" Sam asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Then we'll proceed with foreclosure, which will be more expensive and time-consuming for everyone involved," Janet replied. "The property will be sold at auction, you'll be responsible for any remaining debt after the sale, and you'll have bankruptcy as your only option for dealing with what you still owe." The other man in the group, whom Janet introduced as Mark Stevens from Front Range Property Development, stepped forward with the enthusiasm of someone who smelled opportunity in other people's misfortune. "Mr. Rivers," Stevens said, "I want you to know that we have big plans for this property. The location is perfect for a residential development project that could bring hundreds of families to this area. We're talking about transforming this failed ranch into a thriving community that contributes to local economic growth." Sam looked around at the land that represented 4 generations of his family's sweat, dreams, and determination, trying to imagine it covered with suburban houses and shopping centers rather than the cattle and crops that had sustained the Rivers family for over a century. "This ranch isn't failed," Sam said quietly, though he knew his words sounded hollow given the obvious evidence of decline all around them. "It's just going through a difficult period." "Mr. Rivers," Janet said with the kind of patronizing tone that suggested she was losing patience with his reluctance to accept reality, "look around you. Your fences are falling down, your buildings need major repairs, your fields haven't been properly cultivated in years, and you don't have the capital to make the improvements necessary to return this operation to profitability. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go of something that's no longer viable." Sam knew that everything Janet said was technically true. The ranch did need significant investment to return to productivity, and he didn't have access to the kind of money that would be required to rebuild what had been lost. But he also knew that accepting the bank's offer would mean abandoning the legacy that his great-grandfather had established when he first settled this land in 1923. "I need time to think about it," Sam said finally. "You've had months to think about it," Stevens interjected. "At some point you need to face facts and make a decision that's in everyone's best interest." "Whose best interest?" Sam asked, feeling anger rise in his chest. "Because it seems to me that the only people who benefit from this arrangement are the bank that gets to write off a bad loan and the developer who gets to buy prime real estate for a fraction of its value." "Mr. Rivers," Janet said, her tone becoming more formal, "you have until the end of the week to accept our offer. After that, we'll have no choice but to proceed with foreclosure." After the visitors left, Sam walked through his property, seeing it through their eyes and trying to understand how something that had once been a source of pride had become an object of pity and ridicule. The fences were indeed in poor repair. The barn roof had several holes that he couldn't afford to fix, and the fields that had once supported healthy crops and livestock were now overgrown with weeds and scrub brush. But as he walked, Sam also remembered what the ranch had been during his childhood and young adulthood. He remembered helping his father repair equipment in the barn that was now falling down, learning to ride horses in the corral that was now empty, and working alongside his grandfather in fields that had once been green and productive. Those memories were worth more than any amount of money the bank might offer, but memories wouldn't pay bills or satisfy creditors. That evening, Sam sat on his front porch with a beer and a calculator, trying to figure out if there was any possible way to generate enough income to satisfy his debts and keep the ranch in his family. The numbers were discouraging no matter how he manipulated them, but something inside him refused to give up on the idea that there might be a solution he hadn't considered. As darkness fell over the Colorado landscape, Sam made a decision that would change everything. Instead of accepting defeat, he would spend whatever time he had left trying to restore the ranch to something resembling its former condition. If he was going to lose the property anyway, he would at least lose it while fighting rather than surrendering without a struggle. He had no idea that his decision to fight for his family's legacy would lead to a discovery that would transform not just his own life, but capture the attention of historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters throughout the country. The broken ranch that had become a source of community ridicule was about to reveal secrets that had been hidden beneath its surface for over a century. Digging for hope. The morning after the bank's ultimatum, Sam woke with a determination he hadn't felt in years. If he was going to lose the ranch anyway, he decided, he might as well spend his remaining time trying to restore some dignity to the property that had been his family's pride for 4 generations. Even if his efforts were ultimately futile, at least he would know that he had fought for something meaningful rather than simply accepting defeat. Sam began his restoration project by focusing on the most visible problems, clearing weeds from the fields, repairing sections of fence that had collapsed during recent storms, and patching holes in the barn roof with materials he could afford from his dwindling savings. The work was physically demanding for a man his age, especially working alone, but there was something therapeutic about engaging in productive labor rather than sitting in his kitchen reviewing foreclosure notices. It was while clearing brush from the north pasture, an area that had been neglected for several years, that Sam made the discovery that would change everything. He was using a small bulldozer borrowed from a neighbor to remove stubborn scrub oak when the blade struck something metallic buried about 3 feet beneath the surface. Initially, Sam assumed he had hit an old fence post or piece of farm equipment that had been abandoned and forgotten over the years. But as he dug around the object with a shovel to determine what was causing the obstruction, Sam realized that what he had found was much more interesting than discarded machinery. The metallic object appeared to be some kind of container, roughly the size of a large suitcase, made of what looked like brass or copper that had been corroded by decades of exposure to moisture and soil. Sam's first instinct was excitement at the possibility that he might have found something valuable, but his practical nature quickly tempered his enthusiasm with skepticism. Rural properties often contained old equipment, containers and debris that had been buried by previous owners, and most such discoveries turned out to be worthless junk rather than hidden treasure. Nevertheless, curiosity compelled Sam to excavate the container completely and transport it to his barn, where he could examine it more carefully. The object was heavier than he had expected, requiring considerable effort to load it onto his truck, and it appeared to have been deliberately buried rather than accidentally lost or discarded. Back in his barn, Sam spent several hours carefully cleaning decades of accumulated dirt and corrosion from the container's surface. As the metal became cleaner, he could see that it was indeed made of brass, and that it bore engravings and markings that suggested it was much older than anything that should have been on his property. Most intriguingly, the container appeared to have been sealed with wax and tar, suggesting that someone had taken considerable care to protect its contents from moisture and deterioration. Sam knew that opening the container might damage whatever was inside, but his curiosity eventually overcame his caution. Using tools from his workshop, he carefully broke the ancient seals and pried open what appeared to be a lid that had been designed to close tightly. What he found inside took his breath away. The container held dozens of items that appeared to be artifacts from the late 1800s, leather-bound journals, maps drawn on parchment, photographs printed on glass plates, and various pieces of equipment that Sam didn't recognize, but which looked like they belonged in a museum. But most remarkably, the container also held what appeared to be gold coins, jewelry, and other valuable items that had been carefully wrapped in oiled cloth to protect them from tarnishing. Sam's hands trembled as he examined some of the documents, many of which appeared to be written in multiple languages and contained detailed descriptions of locations, routes, and hidden caches. One leather journal, written in English, contained entries that seemed to describe the activities of someone who was systematically hiding valuable items throughout the Colorado Territory during the 1880s. As Sam read through the journal entries, a picture began to emerge of what he had discovered. The container appeared to have been buried by someone involved in what historians called the Great Western Treasure Networks, organized groups of outlaws, prospectors, and entrepreneurs who had hidden valuable items throughout the American West during periods of social and economic instability. According to the journal, the person who had buried this container was named Jonathan Crawford, and he claimed to be part of a network that had hidden similar caches throughout Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. The journal contained detailed maps showing the locations of other buried containers, along with descriptions of their contents and instructions for finding them. But perhaps most remarkably, the journal indicated that the container Sam had found was only one of several that had been buried on what was now the Rivers Ranch. According to Crawford's notes, the property had been chosen as a hiding place because it was remote, sparsely populated, and unlikely to be developed or extensively excavated in the foreseeable future. Sam sat in his barn until well past midnight, reading through documents and examining artifacts that appeared to be worth far more than the money he owed to his creditors. If the journal was accurate, and if the other containers described in Crawford's maps were still buried on his property, Sam might have stumbled upon a discovery that would solve his financial problems and transform his failing ranch into one of the most historically significant properties in Colorado. But Sam also understood that such discoveries came with complications. If word of his find spread throughout the community, he would likely face claims from treasure hunters, historians, government agencies, and possibly descendants of the people who had originally owned the valuable items. The legal and logistical challenges of managing such a discovery could be almost as overwhelming as the financial problems he was already facing. Over the following days, Sam continued his restoration work while secretly conducting careful excavations in the areas indicated by Crawford's maps. Using a metal detector borrowed from a friend who was an amateur prospector, Sam located 3 additional containers buried at various locations around his property. Each container yielded similar collections of artifacts, documents, and valuable items, confirming that his ranch had indeed been used as a major hiding place by the 19th century treasure network. But Sam also realized that he was in over his head. The historical significance of his discovery was becoming clear, but he lacked the expertise to properly evaluate, preserve, and authenticate the artifacts he had found. Moreover, he was concerned about the legal implications of his discovery and wanted to ensure that he handled the situation properly. It was while researching the legal aspects of treasure finds that Sam learned about Dr. Elizabeth Harper, an archaeologist and historian at Colorado State University who specialized in Western American artifacts and treasure recovery. According to her university biography, Dr. Harper had experience helping property owners navigate the complex legal and historical issues surrounding significant archaeological discoveries. Sam spent another sleepless night debating whether to contact Dr. Harper or to continue trying to handle the situation on his own. On one hand, involving outside experts would mean sharing news of his discovery and potentially complicating his ability to benefit financially from what he had found. On the other hand, Sam understood that properly documenting and authenticating his discovery would be essential for realizing its full value and ensuring that he handled the situation legally and ethically. Finally, Sam decided that the potential benefits of expert guidance outweighed the risks of exposure. He called Dr. Harper's office and arranged for a confidential meeting at his ranch, explaining only that he had found some items on his property that appeared to be historically significant and needed professional advice about how to proceed. As he prepared for Dr. Harper's visit, Sam reflected on how completely his situation had changed in just a few weeks. The ranch that had been the source of shame and ridicule was now potentially the site of one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Colorado history. The property that creditors had viewed as nearly worthless might actually be worth more than anyone had ever imagined. But Sam also understood that his story was far from over. Whatever happened next would depend not just on the value of what he had found, but on his ability to navigate the complex process of turning an archaeological discovery into a solution for his financial problems while preserving the historical significance of his find. Secrets revealed. Elizabeth Harper arrived at the Rivers Ranch on a crisp November morning, driving a university vehicle equipped with archaeological field equipment and accompanied by two graduate students who specialized in 19th century Western American artifacts. Sam had spent the previous night carefully arranging some of his discoveries in his barn, selecting items that would demonstrate the significance of his find without revealing the full scope of what he had uncovered. Dr. Harper was a woman in her 40s, with the kind of professional demeanor that came from years of dealing with significant archaeological discoveries and the complex legal and historical issues they often entailed. She examined Sam's artifacts with the careful attention of someone who understood both their potential value and the importance of proper authentication and documentation. "Mr. Rivers," she said after spending over an hour studying the documents, photographs, and artifacts Sam had shown her, "what you've found here is extraordinary. These items appear to be genuine artifacts from the 1880s, and if the documentation is accurate, you may have discovered evidence of one of the most extensive treasure networks in the American West." Sam felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety as he processed Dr. Harper's assessment. "Does that mean they're valuable?" "Potentially very valuable, both historically and financially," Dr. Harper replied. "But more importantly, this discovery could rewrite our understanding of how wealth and valuable items moved through the Colorado Territory during the late 19th century. The network described in these journals appears to have been much more sophisticated and extensive than historians previously believed." "What do I need to do to handle this properly?" Sam asked. Dr. Harper set down the leather journal she had been examining and looked at Sam with the kind of serious expression that suggested she was about to explain something complicated. "That depends on what your goals are and how extensive this discovery actually is. If you found a few isolated artifacts, the process is relatively straightforward. But if you've discovered evidence of a major treasure network, as these documents suggest, then you're looking at a much more complex situation." Sam realized that he could no longer avoid revealing the full scope of his discovery. "Dr. Harper, what I've shown you today is only a small portion of what I've found. According to the maps and journals, there are multiple caches buried throughout this property, and I've already located several of them." Dr. Harper's eyes widened with excitement and concern. "How many caches are we talking about?" "The documents indicate at least 12 separate containers buried at various locations around the ranch. I found 4 so far, and they all contain similar collections of artifacts, documents, and valuable items." Dr. Harper exchanged glances with her graduate students, clearly processing the implications of what Sam was telling her. "Mr. Rivers, if what you're describing is accurate, you may have made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Colorado history. But you're also facing a situation that will require careful legal, historical, and financial management." Over the following days, Dr. Harper and her team conducted a preliminary survey of Sam's property using ground-penetrating radar and other archaeological tools to locate and map the remaining buried containers. What they found exceeded even Sam's expectations based on the historical documents. The radar survey revealed evidence of at least 15 separate buried objects scattered across the ranch, some of which appeared to be significantly larger than the containers Sam had already excavated. Moreover, the systematic nature of the burials suggested that the Rivers Ranch had been used as a major depot for the treasure network, with items being collected, catalogued and hidden according to a sophisticated organizational system. But the archaeological survey also attracted attention that Sam had been hoping to avoid. Word of unusual activity at the Rivers Ranch began spreading through the local community, and soon Sam was fielding phone calls from reporters, treasure hunters, and curiosity seekers who had heard rumors about significant discoveries on his property. The situation came to a head when Janet Morrison from Mesa County Bank arrived at Sam's ranch, accompanied by Mark Stevens from Front Range Property Development and a lawyer who introduced himself as representing the bank's interests in any discoveries made on the property. "Mr. Rivers," the lawyer said, "we understand that you've made some kind of discovery on this property. We need to discuss how that discovery affects your loan obligations and our pending foreclosure proceedings." Sam felt his stomach clench as he realized that his discovery had created new complications rather than simply solving his financial problems. "I'm not sure I understand," Sam replied. "How does finding historical artifacts on my property affect my relationship with the bank?" "Because," the lawyer explained, "your loan agreements include standard language, giving the bank certain rights to any valuable items discovered on the mortgaged property. If you've found something of significant value, those findings may be subject to our liens." Dr. Harper, who had been documenting artifacts in Sam's barn, emerged to join the conversation with the authority of someone who had dealt with similar situations before. "Actually," she said, "the legal situation is much more complex than you're suggesting. Archaeological discoveries on private property are subject to state and federal regulations that supersede standard mortgage language. Moreover, Mr. Rivers's finds appear to meet the criteria for historical designation, which would place them under the protection of cultural preservation laws." The lawyer and bank representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances, apparently realizing that they were dealing with legal complexities they hadn't anticipated. "Furthermore," Dr. Harper continued, "the university is prepared to offer Mr. Rivers a partnership arrangement that would allow him to benefit financially from his discovery, while ensuring that the artifacts are properly preserved and studied for their historical significance." Sam looked at Dr. Harper with surprise, not having known that such an arrangement was being considered. "The university would pay Mr. Rivers a substantial finder's fee for the artifacts, provide funding for a comprehensive archaeological excavation of the property, and establish an endowment that would allow him to maintain the ranch while converting it into a historical research facility and museum," Dr. Harper explained. "How substantial is substantial?" Sam asked, hardly daring to hope that his financial problems might actually be solved. "Based on preliminary estimates, the artifacts you found are worth between $2 and $3 million, and that's before we've completed the full excavation," Dr. Harper replied. "The university is prepared to offer you $1.5 million for the collection, plus an annual stipend for maintaining the property as a research facility." Sam felt his knees go weak as he processed what Dr. Harper was telling him. The offer was more than enough to pay off all his debts, restore the ranch to full operation, and provide financial security for the rest of his life. But perhaps more importantly, the arrangement would allow him to keep the ranch in his family while transforming it into something that honored both its agricultural heritage and its newly discovered historical significance. The bank representatives and developer left Sam's property that afternoon without making any further demands, apparently recognizing that they no longer held all the cards in whatever negotiations might follow. That evening, as Sam and Dr. Harper finalized the details of their partnership agreement, Sam reflected on how completely his situation had changed in just a few weeks. The ranch that had been the source of shame and ridicule was now the center of national attention, as word of the discovery spread through archaeological and historical communities. "Dr. Harper," Sam said, I need you to know that this discovery has given me more than just financial security. It's given me back my pride in this property and my family's legacy. Mr. Rivers, she replied, you've given the historical community something extraordinary. This discovery is going to change our understanding of the American West and provide research opportunities for decades to come. As they sat on Sam's front porch, looking out at the land that would soon be transformed into a world-class archaeological research facility, both of them understood that they had witnessed something remarkable. The transformation of a failing ranch into a treasure trove that would capture imaginations and rewrite history books for generations to come. The legend reborn. 6 months after Sam's initial discovery, the Rivers Ranch had been transformed from a symbol of failure into one of the most famous archaeological sites in the American West. The comprehensive excavation led by Dr. Harper and her team had uncovered a total of 18 separate caches containing over 3,000 individual artifacts, documents, and valuable items that provided unprecedented insight into the economic and social networks that had operated throughout the Colorado Territory during the 1880s. The discovery had attracted international attention from historians, archaeologists, and treasure enthusiasts, but it had also brought unexpected recognition to Sam himself. The man who had been pitied by his neighbors as a failed rancher was now being celebrated as the discoverer of what the Smithsonian Institution had called one of the most significant archaeological finds in North American Western history. On this particular morning in late spring, Sam stood in what had once been his dilapidated barn, but was now a state-of-the-art archaeological laboratory and museum preparation facility. The building had been completely renovated with climate control systems, advanced security, and specialized equipment for preserving and studying historical artifacts. Through the windows, Sam could see construction crews putting finishing touches on the visitor center that would welcome tourists and researchers from around the world. "Sam!" called Dr. Harper, who had taken a leave of absence from the university to oversee the Rivers Ranch archaeological project. "The delegation from the National Geographic Society has arrived for their visit." Bidem. Sam adjusted the tie he still wasn't completely comfortable wearing and walked outside to greet the visitors who had come to evaluate the site for possible inclusion in a documentary about American treasure discoveries. 6 months earlier, he would never have imagined that he would be hosting representatives from one of the world's most prestigious scientific organizations. The transformation of his property had been remarkable not just in scope, but in speed. The partnership with Colorado State University had provided funding not only for the archaeological work, but also for restoring and modernizing the ranch facilities. The main house had been renovated to serve as both Sam's residence and guest accommodations for visiting researchers, while new buildings had been constructed to house the growing collection of artifacts and provide workspace for ongoing research. But perhaps more importantly for Sam personally, the success of the archaeological project had allowed him to restore the ranch's agricultural operations as well. The financial security provided by his partnership with the university had enabled him to rebuild his cattle herd, repair and modernize his facilities, and hire the help necessary to operate both the ranch and the research facility simultaneously. "Mr. Rivers," said Dr. Patricia Williams from National Geographic, "we're incredibly impressed by what you've accomplished here. The integration of historical preservation with ongoing agricultural operations is exactly the kind of innovative approach to land use that we're interested in documenting." "I have to give most of the credit to Dr. Harper and her team," Sam replied. "I just got lucky enough to dig in the right place at the right time. But you also made the decision to handle your discovery responsibly rather than simply trying to profit from it personally," Dr. Williams replied. "That kind of stewardship is what has made this project so successful." As Sam toured the visitors through the facility, he reflected on how completely his understanding of success and failure had been transformed over the past months. The ranch that had been mocked by his community was now bringing visitors from around the world who came to see the artifacts and learn about the historical networks that had operated throughout the American West. More than just the financial benefits, though, the archaeological project had given Sam a sense of purpose and accomplishment that he hadn't experienced since before his wife's illness had begun the downward spiral that had nearly cost him everything. He was now not just a rancher, but also a historian, educator, and steward of one of the most important archaeological sites in Colorado. "Sam, Doctor," Harper said, as the National Geographic delegation departed, "I wanted to let you know that the peer review of our research has been completed, and the findings will be published in next month's issue of American Archaeology magazine." What did they conclude? They've confirmed that the treasure network documented in Crawford's journals was even more extensive than we initially believed. We now have evidence that similar caches exist throughout at least 6 western states, and several other property owners have contacted us about possible discoveries on their land. Sam nodded, understanding that his discovery had implications that extended far beyond his own property and financial situation. "But there's something else," Dr. Harper continued. "The success of our project here has attracted attention from the Department of the Interior. They're interested in designating the Rivers Ranch as a National Historic Site, which would provide federal funding for ongoing research and preservation." Sam felt a surge of pride at the possibility that his family's ranch might receive such recognition. What would that mean practically? It would mean permanent protection for the site, substantial funding for continued archaeological work, and recognition as one of the most important historical properties in the American West. It would also mean that your family's legacy would be preserved for future generations. That evening, Sam sat on his front porch, now restored and expanded to accommodate the visitors who regularly came to tour the facility, and reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him from the brink of bankruptcy to national recognition as a significant contributor to American historical research. The phone calls he now received were from reporters, researchers, and documentary filmmakers, rather than creditors demanding payment. The visitors who came to his property arrived with cameras and notebooks rather than foreclosure notices. The community that had once pitied him now took pride in having one of the most famous archaeological sites in the region located in their area. But perhaps most remarkably, Sam had discovered that the property he had been prepared to lose had actually been invaluable all along. The land that creditors had viewed as nearly worthless had been hiding treasures that were literally priceless in their historical significance and substantial in their financial value. A year earlier, Sam had been facing the loss of everything his family had built over 4 generations. Now, he was not only financially secure, but had also ensured that the Rivers Ranch would remain in his family permanently while serving as a center for historical research and education. The broken-down ranch that had been the subject of community ridicule had become a destination that attracted visitors from around the world. The man who had been pitied as a failure was now celebrated as someone who had made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in American history. As Sam looked out at his property, now bustling with activity as researchers, students, and tourists explored the site where so much history had been hidden, he understood that sometimes what appears to be worthless ground holds secrets that can transform everything we think we know about a place and its past. The ranch that time had forgotten had become a place where history was being rewritten, and the man who had refused to give up on his family's legacy had ensured that the river's name would be remembered for generations to come. This incredible story of Sam Rivers reminds us that perseverance in the face of adversity can lead to discoveries that change everything, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden beneath the most unlikely circumstances. His journey shows us that what appears to be failure may actually be the foundation for extraordinary success, and that refusing to give up on something we believe in can lead to rewards beyond our wildest imagination. If this story inspired you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more amazing stories about determination, discovery, and second chances. Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from and share your thoughts about never giving up on your dreams, even when everyone else thinks they're impossible. Remember, we all have hidden treasures within us waiting to be discovered, and sometimes our greatest victories come from our darkest moments. Until next time, keep believing that extraordinary things can happen to ordinary people who refuse to quit.